Let's talk about higher education in South Africa. Universities. South Africa is a place obsessed with universities, and that's because in the past people were denied access to universities. What's happened in South Africa is because we have deindustrialized, everybody wants to get a degree. They want a white-collar job, which means go out and get a degree so that you can work in an office somewhere. So we've got enormous pressure to go and get a university degree, an outsized pressure. Other countries, including the first world, don't have people wanting to go to university to the degree that we've got in South Africa. And needless to say, the ANC, if my memory serves me correctly, have built 2 universities in 30 years. You're right. Let's remember that the universities that we've got were built for the white minority population. Instead of building a whole lot more universities, no. The ANC has tried to change those universities, which has succeeded, and not built new ones, except for, I know that there's one in Mafeking and one in Mpumalanga. But the point is this. Are you ready for some eye-watering number? The vice-chancellor is basically the CEO of the university. He's like the main oak at the university. The vice-chancellor of the University of Johannesburg is Professor Letlogwa Mpedi. He earns, are you sitting down, 8.2 million rand per year. 8.2 million rand a year. It's about 700,000 rand a month to be the principal of the university. That is a lot of money. For a guy taking no risk, and there's no results that back up that the guy's doing a great job, right? That's the salary he earns. But he's not the only one. The Wits Vice-Chancellor, Zeblon Vilakazi, earns 7.3 million rand a year. Small universities like Walter Sisulu University in the Eastern Cape, there the Vice-Chancellor, Rachel Sonka, earns 4.5 million rand a year. That's twice as much as a cabinet minister. The Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Professor Chris Ntlapo, earns 4.75 million rand a year. This is our money, by the way, tax money. So one would say, well, maybe these guys are doing a staggeringly good job. I understand that South Africa's got one university in the top 200, and that's UCT, which currently ranks, 2024 ranking, at 167 in the world. 10 years ago, it was 120 in the world. So somebody's doing a really bad job. Those small universities where the guys earn 4.5 million and above, the Cape Peninsula University of Technology and Walter Sisulu, they're in the range of 1,200 to 1,500 in the world. They don't even bother to give it a number, they just give it a range. So quite clearly, there is no bang for the buck that these universities, that these vice-chancellors are getting. They're basically doing a terrible job, and we're just paying a hell of a lot of money for them to do such a bad job. Now the situation gets worse. Because when to South Africa, when you just think that things couldn't get worse, listen to this one. The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, which seems to be about the only ministry trying to do stuff, and even they're not doing it very well, came out with new draft regulations. And inside those draft regulations was a clause that allowed educational institutions, i.e. universities, to be listed as originators of credit information. Basically, when you get a loan, a student loan, that it's actually a loan. But this is South Africa. Immediately everybody sings, dances. That's when you know South Africans are really unhappy. And the minister, being a courageous ANC cadre, Parks Tau, same guy who was a very bad mayor of Johannesburg, withdraws his draft regulations. Now, of course, this leaves those universities with no recourse. So imagine now, if everybody gets a student loan, you know that nothing can be done to the guy who doesn't pay his loan back. Even, let's just say I get a wonderful education and a top job and I earn so much money that I become, vice-chancellor of a university. Why would I pay the money back if the guy next to me is not paying his money back and nothing's happening about it? So you've created what's called moral hazard. That is where there is no punishment for the bad outcome, because they've removed these draft regulations. So they might as well just scrap it and say it's not really a loan. Here's money, pay back if you feel like it. If you don't, don't. Yeah, we know what usually happens when you give people those kind of options. Right? There's just going to be a hell of a lot more red ink on the South African balance sheet, because we're going to have more student loans that end up not being paid. And understand that all of these universities are sitting there with allowance for these loans to be paid back that are never going to be paid back. We are going down the wrong road so fast when it comes to education, because we've made it an obsession in this country about getting a degree, which leads to overcrowding at universities. The government will not build more universities because they're not very good at that kind of stuff. They won't run them properly because they're not good at that kind of stuff. And you and I, dear South African taxpayer, have to pay for this. And not only do we have to pay for this in money, we have to pay for this because we're going to have a whole lot of South Africans that aren't very skilled. They're going to come out of these universities with a bad education, a whole lot of debt that they're never going to repay, and they will be that wonderful thing that confuses the life out of me. And if it makes any sense to you, please let me know. And it's called something we hear a lot of. Have you heard this term? A graduate who can't get a job. Surely if you become a graduate, you've got the knowledge to make your own living. But apparently there's a thing, must be a South African first, we must be first in the world, where a graduate can't get a job. The guy clearly then isn't armed with enough information to start his own business or to add value. So he sits at home and he says, oh, I don't have a job. It's the craziest thing ever, but hey, make it make sense to me, because it doesn't. But that's the problem with our higher education. To all of you insiders that joined us today, thank you so much. And we'll see you again soon. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.